Good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. And Navajo County is located in northeastern Arizona. It's the state's seventh smallest county by population, about 200 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border. But in the past 3 years, the county has seen a big rise in the number of fentanyl seizures happening there. Fentanyl that's coming here from Mexico. Navajo County Sheriff David Clouse joins me now to explain that what he's seeing in northern Arizona, again, hundreds of miles away from the border, what happens at the border doesn't necessarily stay there. So thank you very much for joining us here. And let's just start with that. Tell us, give us a sense of how, how many seizures you're seeing and how has that grown?
Yeah, well, with Arizona being a border state, we're not just border counties that are seeing that impact. Like you said, Navajo County, located on I-40, is the highway of fentanyl that's leaving the state to the rest of the country. In 2019, Dennis, we seized 60,000 fentanyl pills in our county, which we thought was very significant at the time. Last year, our county, our interdiction team, seized over 2 million pills. And that's just a 3-year change. We're seeing just exorbitant numbers that are unsustainable.
These are people using the I-40 in Arizona as a pass-through, or how do you know this is coming from Mexico? How do you know this is coming from the border? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so Navajo County is one of the 7 HIDTA counties within Arizona, high-intensity drug trafficking area. And our HIDTA reports and our HIDTA analysts show us that over half the seizures in the country of fentanyl are coming through Arizona. And it's all Cartel south of the border. And we're seeing that they're using I-40 as a highway to use outside of 10 because 10 has so much pressure. There's a lot of exposure, a lot of federal agency, state, local. 40 has less resources, less police forces, and less exposure. So we are trying to do our part in working this problem across the state of Arizona.
Yeah, and talk about less resources. I first met you not long ago. Actually, it was a couple months ago. You were down at the state legislature. You were looking for money from the governor, somebody to appropriate more money to help with the seizures up there. How much money were you looking for, and did you get it?
Yes, yeah. So we asked the state legislature and the governor to reallocate those funds that were being used for the border strike force under Governor Ducey to be for all law enforcement agencies within Arizona, especially rural, and kind of have this enforcement across layers of the state. So we were able to secure $12.7 million that local agencies such as mine can use for our drug task force. You're seeing the numbers that we were doing making a significant difference. And now with that, we're able to have a more sustainable type task force that we can count this. We appreciate what the state's done, but now we can have a little more sure footing for the future.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit more, give us a little more of an example, like how you're going to be able to use that money and what do you expect the results of this that's going to net?
Yeah, so you look at like our county, we don't have Border Patrol. We don't have the federal resources that you see in these border counties. So we're doing that with our general fund money. And we're seeing a lot of growth in Arizona. We're seeing a lot of growth in our county. So we're being stretched in 100 different ways of trying to do our day-in job, but we also need to have a bigger presence as we deal with this fentanyl issue and we deal with the migrants. And so if we have that, we can now be a little more proactive in those types of areas.
And what'd you take, recently there was a big, lead up to the end of Title 42, and everybody thought, we're going to see this big surge of migrants coming across the border. It really didn't materialize in the way that people were predicting. However, over the past few years, you're saying that you're seeing a massive explosion in the number of fentanyl seizures along the I-40 corridor there. I mean, when you see other sheriffs down at the border, are you looking at that going, well, they're just using this as a political prop at this point? I'm seeing some real problems up here, but, these sheriffs may be just using this as a prop.
Yeah, I wouldn't be distracted by the fact that we didn't have a big surge after Title 42. Yeah. Is it a wait-and-see tactic that they're doing? But look at before that. The surge started years ago. It's not like it was after May 11th of this year that all of a sudden we're going to have this balloon. If they tell you that, and I say they, if the federal government is trying to say they have operational control of the border, we don't.
Yeah, but nobody can ever defend what operational control of the border is the issue. I've seen plenty of politicians. I've used that term, and I've asked them define operational control, and I never get an answer.
So I think the only takeaway I would say is Title 42 didn't have this explosion. we must have been seeing it for the last 2.5 years, 3 years, 4 years prior to that. It already was there, and we just weren't recognizing it, I guess.
Yeah, but do you think when they're using that as a backdrop down there, again, does it take resources that could otherwise be going to you and your operations down there? Because you see a lot of border sheriffs, along the fence all the time, a lot of politicians down at the fence. Do you think that's just a political prop they're using that for, to get more resources that may be going to your county and your needs otherwise?
Well, I mean, obviously the border is where you need to have your most focus. You do see a lot of politicians that go down there and say, we want to make a difference, we want to make a change. Well, why haven't we done it? This is something Arizona, I think what really is, the citizens of this state have recognized that problem for all these years, and maybe they do get tired of all the people saying they're going to come here and they're going to make a difference, and we haven't. It's well overdue that we do something better, rather than having the cartels dictate what is happening on that border. They're the ones who have operational control of that border, not law enforcement.
And final question here, the fentanyl is coming through, most of it comes through the ports of entry, so there's not a whole lot the state can do. That's a federal situation there because they do control the ports of entry. Have you been reaching out to our representatives in Washington, Arizona's representatives in Washington about this issue? What have you been hearing from them?
Yeah, that's a great question because Senator Kelly met with many of the northern Arizona sheriffs just a couple weeks ago, and we discussed that same issue, saying, just because Navajo County now sees 2 million fentanyl pills, that's not a good thing that we're seizing more. Obviously, they're getting more through if we're catching more, but we have to change the way we're doing business at the border, whether it's the way we interact with the Mexican government, is the way that we have commerce that comes back and forth, but what we're doing is not working, and there has to be a change. And I know the citizens and I know law enforcement is overwhelmed about the amount of drugs, the amount of crime, and the amount of violence that we're seeing at that border on both sides. And it's just unsustainable. And I think the people are getting tired of Arizona just being this lawless community for that.
All right, Sheriff Clouse from Navajo County, we're going to have to end it right there. Thank you very much for stopping by here and spending some time with us here today. And still ahead,